The lunar landings were more than likely fabricated, faked.
I affirm that we didn't go to the moon, and I would bet my life on it.
We did not land men on the moon.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
July 20th, 1969, a date etched in human history. What if those iconic images of Neil Armstrong's one small step were actually choreographed under studio lights, directed by unseen hands to win a desperate Cold War gambit? That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. These words echoed around the world as millions watched fuzzy black and white footage of what appeared to be a human walking on another world for the first time. But not everyone was convinced. The seeds of skepticism were planted in 1976 when Bill Kaysing, a former U.S. Navy officer who had worked as a technical writer for one of NASA's Apollo program rocket manufacturers, self-published a book with the provocative title, "We Never Went to the Moon, America's $30 billion Swindle." Despite having no background in rocketry or engineering, Kaysing claimed insider knowledge of a massive government conspiracy. But why would anyone believe such an extraordinary claim? The timing couldn't have been more perfect for skepticism to flourish. America was reeling from the Watergate scandal, the Vietnam War had eroded public trust, and the idea that the government would lie to its citizens no longer seemed far-fetched. Conspiracy theories found fertile ground in this climate of distrust. NASA couldn't manage to safely land a man on the moon by the end of the 1960s, as President John F. Kennedy had promised, claimed the theorists, so they simply faked it by sending astronauts into Earth orbit while staging the moon scenes in a film studio. This narrative has persisted for decades, with believers pointing to what they consider suspicious evidence in NASA's own footage and photographs. The smoking guns, what conspiracy theorists claim. Let's examine what conspiracy theorists consider their strongest evidence. Think of these as their gotcha moments, the supposed slip-ups that revealed the truth behind the curtain. The waving flag. Perhaps the most cited proof is footage showing an American flag appearing to wave on the airless moon. The flag's movement, conspiracy theorists claim, clearly shows the presence of wind, which is impossible in a vacuum. If there's no air on the moon, how could the flag possibly flutter? Inconsistent shadows. Take a look at any moon landing photograph and you might notice something peculiar about the shadows. They don't all appear to run parallel to each other, despite there being only one light source, the sun. Conspiracy theorists pounce on this as evidence of multiple studio lights being used on a set. The perfect photographs. How did astronauts in bulky spacesuits with gloved hands manage to take perfectly framed photographs? And more puzzlingly, if Neil Armstrong was the first person on the moon who filmed him coming down the ladder. The lethal radiation. Space is filled with deadly radiation from the Van Allen belts, radiation belts that surround Earth. Conspiracy theorists argue that astronauts would have been fried passing through these belts, making lunar missions impossible with 1960s technology. The missing stars. Look at the iconic images from the moon. Notice anything missing? Despite the lack of atmosphere, no stars are visible in the dark lunar sky. Conspiracy theorists suggest this was an oversight by the NASA set designers. Debunking the myths, what science actually tells us. Now that we've laid out the conspiracy claims, let's shine the light of science on each of these supposed smoking guns. What if these gotcha moments actually have perfectly rational explanations? The flag physics. NASA has a simple explanation for the waving flag. Aldrin was twisting the flagpole to get the moon soil, which caused the flag to move. The flag was also specially designed with a horizontal rod to keep it extended in the airless environment. Shadow science. This is on the surface of the moon, but we can reproduce this effect anytime we want to on Earth, explains Professor Anu Ojha. The non-parallel shadows that conspiracy theorists point to are easily explained by uneven terrain. Just as shadows on Earth appear to point in different directions when cast on hills and valleys, the same principle applies on the lunar surface. The camera question. Who filmed Neil Armstrong on the ladder? This question has a straightforward answer. They simply mounted a camera on the descent stage of the lunar module and pointed it at the steps. That giant leap was relayed live to NASA and TV viewers all over the world via receiving stations on Earth. Radiation reality. While the Van Allen belts do contain radiation, the Apollo missions were carefully timed and trajectories planned to minimize exposure. The astronauts passed through the belts relatively quickly, receiving a dose well within safe limits, comparable to a chest X-ray. The starless sky. The stars aren't visible in moon photos for the same reason you can't see stars in daytime photos on Earth: exposure settings. The cameras were set to capture the brightly lit astronauts and lunar surface, not the relatively faint stars. How the moon landing was actually filmed. The truth about filming the moon landing is fascinating in its own right, and far more impressive than any studio production could have been in 1969. Would you believe that NASA initially didn't even plan to include a television camera on the mission? Incredibly, NASA had initially seen no reason for any television pictures. Mission planners were focused on the essentials: voice communication, vital lunar module systems data, and astronaut biomedical telemetry. The addition of a television camera was a last-minute decision, championed by old-timers at NASA who recognized the historic importance of visual documentation. The camera that eventually captured humanity's first steps on the moon was a specially designed 3.29 kilograms Westinghouse black and white camera mounted upside down to avoid vibration in the modular equipment stowage assembly left of the ladder on the lunar module descent stage. The evidence is out of this world, literally. If you're still skeptical, consider the physical evidence that exists outside of NASA's control. What tangible proof do we have that humans actually walked on the moon? Moon rocks. Apollo astronauts brought back 842 pounds of lunar rocks and soil samples. These have been studied by scientists around the world, including those from countries that were rivals of the United States. Third-party verification. The Soviet Union, America's Cold War rival with every incentive to expose a hoax, tracked the Apollo missions and never disputed their legitimacy. Contemporary technology limitations. Film experts have noted that the technology to fake the moon landings in a way that would stand up to scientific scrutiny? Modern photographic confirmation. Since the late 2000s, high-definition photos taken by the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, LRO, of the Apollo landing sites have captured the lunar module descent stages and the tracks left by the astronauts. The persistence of disbelief. Despite overwhelming evidence, the conspiracy theories persist. Opinion polls indicate that between 5 to 10% of Americans, 12% of Britons, 20% of Italians, and as many as 57% of Russians believe the moon landings were faked. How can we distinguish fact from fiction in an age where seeing is no longer believing? As we reflect on the moon landing conspiracy theories, we're faced with a choice between two possibilities. Option 1, thousands of NASA employees, contractors, tracking station operators, and scientists around the world maintained perfect secrecy about a massive hoax for over 5 decades, with not a single credible whistleblower coming forward with concrete evidence. Option 2, human ingenuity, determination, and technology actually accomplished one of our species' greatest achievements, placing human footprints on another world. The scientific consensus is clear. Historians and the scientific community believe that moon landing conspiracy theories are irrational. The evidence overwhelmingly supports the reality of the Apollo missions, from the physical moon rocks to the recent orbital photographs of the landing sites. What do you think? Is moon landing something which was staged? Drop down in the comments and subscribe.